Everyone has imagined what it would be like to try and survive in a zombie apocalypse. And it's probably because it's super fun to imagine and interesting to talk about, but after this video, you will never imagine it in the same way. I've decided to list everything people get wrong about zombie apocalypse survival, starting with one people overlook: endless hordes. Most zombie fans assume the undead will roam forever, creating an endless nightmare that never stops. The Walking Dead shows walkers stumbling around for years, and World War Z depicts massive swarms that seem unstoppable across entire continents. Zombies would decompose insanely fast. Without immune systems or metabolism, their bodies become instant buffets for bacteria, insects, and scavengers. In hot, humid climates, maggots would reduce them to skeletons within weeks. Cold weather would freeze their tissue until bones snap like twigs. Even the rage-infected from 28 days later, who are technically alive, would starve to death since they can't process food for energy. Animals would treat slow-moving zombies like easy prey, tearing them apart before they could form threatening hordes. The Walking Dead's endless waves of intact walkers year after year completely ignores basic biology and environmental breakdown. The truth is, you could literally wait them out in a secure location, and nature would do most of the work for you. This flips the entire survival strategy from constant running to smart fortification and patience. If you thought that was a relief, wait until you hear what people get wrong about actually fighting these things. Easy headshots. Everyone thinks popping zombies with perfect headshots is straightforward because Resident Evil and Left 4 Dead make it look simple. Rick Grimes in The Walking Dead nails walker skulls with his Colt revolver like he's at a shooting range, and Alice in Resident Evil performs acrobatic kills with pinpoint accuracy. But military training data shows that even experienced soldiers struggle with headshots under stress. The human skull is tough, bullets can deflect off bone at bad angles, and your hands shake when adrenaline floods your system. Center mass shots are what professionals train for because they're far more reliable for stopping threats. The myth that you can casually headshot zombies ignores that most people have never fired a gun in their lives, let alone at a moving target while panicking. In World War Z, soldiers spray bullets everywhere during massive swarms because precision becomes impossible in chaos. Train to Busan shows desperate survivors swinging bats wildly because landing clean hits is way harder than it looks. The video game stats showing 100% kill rates on headshots create unrealistic expectations that would leave you out of ammo and surrounded by very alive zombies. Forget the Hollywood accuracy and aim for immobilization instead, because a zombie with broken legs can't chase you even if its head is intact. This completely changes how you think about combat efficiency and ammo conservation. That ammunition problem leads directly to the next massive misconception that could leave you defenseless when you need weapons most. And here's something that'll blow your mind. Even if you somehow became a headshot expert, you're solving the wrong problem. Because what nobody tells you is that a zombie with a destroyed brain can still kill you if it falls on you during the shot. The weight of a corpse, the momentum of its fall, the bodily fluids spraying everywhere one 180-pound walker collapsing onto you could pin you down long enough for 3 more to join the feast. Military combat reports show that neutralized enemies still pose threats through their mass and position. You'd spend so much time and ammo perfecting kills that you'd forget the most important rule: distance and barriers, not accuracy. Keep you breathing. Guns everywhere. The Walking Dead characters constantly fire guns. Resident Evil revolves around finding bigger weapons, and Left 4 Dead gives you unlimited firearms to blast through infected. Everyone assumes that having guns means you're safe, and the louder and flashier the weapon, the better your chances. Here's the problem. Every gunshot is a dinner bell for every zombie within hearing range. Suppressors help, but they're rare and not actually silent like movies pretend. Ammunition expires within months if not stored properly, and you definitely can't carry enough to fight off real hordes. The noise from Rick's revolver in The Walking Dead would attract walkers from blocks away, turning every encounter into a bigger threat. Resident Evil's endless ammo cheats are pure fantasy, and in reality, you'd run dry fast. Quieter options like Daryl's crossbow or basic melee weapons let you stay off the radar. 28 days later, survivors use cricket bats because stealth beats firepower when noise means death. Army of the Dead shows how guns create cascading problems when shots echo through empty cities, drawing more infected than you can possibly handle. Smart survivors would treat guns as absolute last resorts and rely on silent weapons to avoid becoming the center of attention. This means rethinking your entire defensive strategy around staying quiet instead of going loud. And speaking of bad strategies, people make terrible choices about where to find supplies. But even knowing all this, people still make a more fundamental mistake about where they plan to get these weapons in the first place. But let's talk about what actually happens when you fire that gun. It's the flash, the smell of gunpowder, the brass casings hitting the ground. In complete darkness, which is what most of a post-apocalypse world looks like without electricity, your muzzle flash blinds you for precious seconds and tells every threat within visual range exactly where you are. Night vision? Good luck finding batteries that work after after 6 months. The reality is that one trigger pull creates a sensory beacon that marks you as either prey or competition to everything in the area, living or dead. And if you're indoors, the concussive force in enclosed spaces can rupture your eardrums, leaving you disoriented and unable to hear approaching threats. Suddenly, that pistol feels less like protection and more like a suicide button. If you are enjoying this breakdown and want to be a part of a larger community and get your views actual noticed, the Discord server is absolutely for you. Link is in the description below. Store rating. The first thing everyone plans to do is hit up the grocery store or pharmacy, just like the survivors in Dawn of the Dead who hole up in a shopping mall. World War Z shows panicked crowds flooding stores in the early outbreak, and the Walking Dead survivors constantly search abandoned shops. But think about it. Every desperate person has the same idea. Stores become death traps packed with infected shoppers fighting over the last supplies. The mall in Dawn of the Dead turns into a siege precisely because it's an obvious target. Chaos at supply points spreads infection faster than anywhere else when people are crammed together in panic mode. Georgetown emergency management experts point out that preparing at home before disaster strikes gives you way better odds than joining the mob. Rural scavenging from scattered houses means less competition and fewer infected encounters. The Walking Dead's early seasons show characters dying in stores because crowds turn into feeding frenzies. Train to Busan demonstrates how public spaces become instant kill zones when everyone converges on the same spots. Stock up at home ahead of time or skip the obvious targets entirely, because the crowd will get you killed faster than the zombies. This shifts survival prep from reactive scrambling to proactive planning before things go south. But even with supplies handled, people seriously underestimate the wrong threat. But avoiding stores might save you from crowds, yet there's an even deadlier threat that everyone underestimates until it's too late. And there's another layer to the store problem that nobody thinks about. Legal liability turns into lethal reality. Those same stores have security systems, locked cages, and reinforced areas designed to keep people out. In a panic, you're trying to break into a pharmacy cage while zombies break into the store. You're making noise with crowbars and bolt cutters, you're trapped in corners with limited exits, and you're surrounded by glass and aluminum that amplifies every sound. Plus, stores are designed with customer flow in mind. Long aisles, limited sight lines, and choke points at checkouts. It's a shooting gallery where you're the target. The survivors who raid stores successfully in movies have something you won't: empty stores. In reality, you'll arrive to find hundreds of people with the same idea, which means you're not just avoiding zombies, you're navigating a human stampede in the worst possible terrain. Zombie focus. Every zombie story puts the undead front and center as the main danger. The Walking Dead, World War Z, and 28 Days Later all make zombies the primary antagonists that survivors must constantly fear and fight. But look closer at those same stories, and you'll notice something. Humans cause more deaths than zombies. The Governor in The Walking Dead slaughters more people than walkers ever did at the prison. Negan and the Saviors prove that organized human threats are deadlier than shambling corpses. Real disaster studies show that resource conflicts, betrayal, and desperation turn people into worse monsters than any zombie. In World War Z, the geopolitical collapse and human panic kill millions before zombies even reach most areas. The Last of Us demonstrates how survivor factions become the actual enemy, with bandits and cannibals more terrifying than clickers. Army of the Dead features human betrayal as the twist that dooms the entire mission, not the alpha zombies. 28 Weeks Later shows military incompetence and cover-ups spreading infection more than the rage virus itself. Trust is your biggest vulnerability because other survivors might rob you, kill you for food, or throw you to the zombies to save themselves. This means your survival strategy must account for human threats as much as or more than the undead lurking outside. And while people worry about bites, they ignore something way more deadly. And that vulnerability extends beyond human threats to something even more insidious that's killing you from the inside: bite obsession. The Walking Dead makes everyone paranoid about bites and scratches. Resident Evil focuses on infection from zombie attacks, and The Last of Us shows spore exposure as the transmission method everyone fears. But everyday health problems would kill you way faster than zombie infections. Appendicitis becomes a death sentence without surgery. Infected wisdom teeth or dental cavities could cause blood poisoning. Minor cuts turn septic without antibiotics. Poor hygiene leads to dysentery and parasites from contaminated water. The rule of threes says you die in 3 hours without shelter in extreme weather, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Zombies aren't even on that list because dehydration and exposure kill quicker. Army of the Dead survivors ignore basic first aid until injuries fester. The Walking Dead rarely shows characters dealing with chronic conditions like diabetes or asthma, which would be fatal when medications run out. Real disaster scenarios prove that disease from rotting corpses in cities spreads faster than zombie bites. Water treatment through boiling or filtering prevents more deaths than any anti-zombie measures. Stock medical supplies, learn first aid, and treat hygiene like your life depends on it, because it absolutely does. This means survival prep looks more like a camping medical kit than a weapons cache. But people also make terrible assumptions about where to survive. But even if you solve every health issue, you're still stuck in the worst possible location without realizing it. Here's the dark truth about medical emergencies that zombie media never shows. Without anesthesia, even simple procedures become impossible. Imagine trying to remove an infected appendix on a kitchen table with someone screaming. Now imagine that noise attracting every zombie in a half-mile radius. The person dies from shock or blood loss, and your whole group dies from the horde that showed up for dinner. Or consider this: mental health collapse. PTSD, depression, and survivor's guilt would be universal, yet nobody's stockpiling psychiatric medications or therapy skills. The Walking Dead touches on this with characters breaking down, but the reality would be far worse. Suicide rates would skyrocket, people would become catatonic, and group cohesion would shatter under psychological pressure. You're not just treating wounds. You're managing trauma in a world where breaking down mentally means breaking down physically, and both mean death. City defense. Urban environments seem perfect in 28 Days Later and Resident Evil's Raccoon City, with all those supplies and fortified buildings. The Walking Dead shows Alexandria as a walled community inside city limits, and World War Z depicts military defenses in urban centers. But cities are death traps for multiple reasons. Rotting corpses everywhere spread disease faster than zombies spread infection. Dense populations mean massive hordes of infected people concentrated in small areas. Infrastructure fails immediately, leaving no power, water, or sewage systems. The Last of Us shows how urban environments become fungal nightmares when buildings trap moisture and decay. High-rise apartments in Train to Busan become vertical coffins when stairwells fill with infection. Dawn of the Dead's mall works temporarily, but eventually attracts too many zombies and hostile humans. Military containment in 28 Weeks Later fails because cities have too many entry points to secure. Science experts point out that urban heat accelerates zombie decomposition, but also creates unbearable living conditions for survivors. Get to rural areas with natural water sources, lower population density, and space to grow food. Islands work even better since zombies can't swim, as World War Z mentions with offshore havens. This completely changes where you plan to go when the outbreak hits, and even if you pick the right location. People mess up the timing and that assumption about rescue coming eventually. It's built on a fantasy about military response that completely ignores reality. Quick resolution. Everyone assumes the military will handle outbreaks quickly, like in Resident Evil where special forces show up, or World War Z where governments coordinate global responses. The Walking Dead implies that help is coming in early episodes before characters realize it's not, but logistics make fast responses impossible. The military can't be everywhere at once, and communication breaks down immediately during widespread panic. Historical disaster responses show that even prepared organizations take days or weeks to mobilize effectively. World War Z's book version details how bureaucracy and denial delay action until it's too late. The Last of Us shows how a single outbreak night spirals into total collapse before authorities can react. 28 Weeks Later demonstrates that even with military containment, one mistake reignites the entire infection. Army of the Dead reveals that governments just nuke problem zones instead of mounting rescues. Survival dispatch experts note that civilians should plan for prolonged independence because rescue won't arrive in time, if at all. Prepare to survive on your own for months or years, not days, because nobody is coming to save you. This means your entire supply strategy needs to account for the long haul, not just the first week. But people also get basic priorities completely backwards. Let's say you've survived the initial chaos and dodged the military collapse. You still face a resource crisis that most people completely misunderstand. And let's destroy another comfortable fantasy while we're at it. Communication is dead, and it's never coming back. No cell phones, no internet, no radio networks except maybe ham radio if you know how to use it, which you don't. This means you can't coordinate with other survivors, can't call for help, can't get weather warnings, and can't know what's happening one town over. The Walking Dead characters somehow always find each other through sheer plot convenience, but reality means permanent isolation. You could walk into an area that was cleared yesterday and is now overrun today, with no way to know until you're surrounded. Or here's worse, you could be 50 miles from a functioning survivor community with food, medicine, and safety, but you'd never know it exists. The information blackout doesn't just make survival harder, it makes hope impossible, because you can't know if things are getting better or if you're alone in a dead world. Food first. Everyone focuses on stockpiling food because zombie media shows survivors raiding kitchens and fighting over rations. The Walking Dead constantly features food scarcity, and World War Z shows supply chain collapse making meals scarce. But water kills you way faster than hunger. 3 days without water versus 3 weeks without food means hydration is your top priority. Clean water sources are harder to secure than you think because municipal systems fail immediately. Boiling and filtering become essential skills that most people don't have. The Walking Dead rarely shows the reality of water purification efforts. Army of the Dead characters lug around guns instead of water containers. Reddit survival communities emphasize that water stockpiles run out fast, so you need sustainable sources like rainwater collection or natural springs. Dehydration impairs your judgment and physical ability, making you zombie food even if you have a full pantry. Secure clean water first, then worry about food, because all the canned goods in the world won't help if you die of thirst. This reordering of priorities changes what you pack and where you go during evacuation. And speaking of supplies, people assume things last forever. Water might kill you in days, but the next mistake ensures you won't even survive that long. Eternal resources. Video games like Left 4 Dead and Resident Evil let you find supplies in perfect condition years after the outbreak. The Walking Dead shows characters using vehicles and generators long after infrastructure collapse, but everything degrades fast without maintenance. Gasoline goes bad in 3 to 6 months, turning vehicles into useless metal boxes. Batteries corrode, medications expire, and canned food loses nutritional value over time. No HVAC means you die from heat stroke or hypothermia in extreme climates. Survivors in Army of the Dead find Las Vegas full of useless gear because time destroyed everything. 28 weeks later shows how quickly London falls apart without human maintenance. Generators need fuel and create carbon monoxide poisoning in enclosed spaces, something Resident Evil conveniently ignores. Real preppers know that sustainable solutions like solar chargers, manual tools, and preserved food through old-school methods are the only long-term answers. Plan for resource production, not just consumption, because scavenging runs dry fast. This means learning skills like farming, hunting, and crafting instead of just hoarding. But even with resources managed, people make fatal social mistakes. Even if you somehow maintain your resources perfectly, the next mistake would destroy you from within your own group. But the resource degradation problem goes even deeper into stuff you'd never think about. Rubber rots. Every seal, gasket, hose, and tire becomes brittle and useless within a year or two. Your gas mask? The rubber seal fails and you're breathing spores or airborne pathogens. Your water filtration system? The O-rings crack and now you're drinking contaminated water without knowing it. Shoes fall apart, leaving you barefoot in a world of broken glass and infected blood. Even bullets degrade. The primers corrode, the powder absorbs moisture, and suddenly your gun goes click instead of bang when you need it most. And forget about electronics completely. Capacitors fail, circuits corrode, and electromagnetic pulses from infrastructure collapse could fry anything solid state anyway. The comfortable modern world isn't just gone, it's actively disintegrating around you, and every day makes the tools you're counting on less reliable until you're basically living in the Stone Age with a zombie problem. Instant trust. The Walking Dead starts with Rick joining groups, and survivors in most zombie media quickly form alliances. World War Z shows humanity coming together, and The Last of Us has Joel partnering with Ellie almost immediately. But real disasters reveal that strangers are dangerous until proven otherwise. Resource scarcity drives people to rob and kill for survival advantages. The Walking Dead's later seasons prove this with the Saviors, Whisperers, and endless hostile groups. Betrayal plots in Army of the Dead show how greed destroys cooperation. The Last of Us bandits ambush travelers routinely because desperation erases morality. Without background checks or quarantine protocols, you invite infection and violence into your safe zone. Strip searches and isolation periods for newcomers are essential, as 28 weeks later demonstrates when ignored, protocols restart the outbreak. Trauma from having to euthanize infected loved ones would break most people psychologically. Keep groups small with vetted members, or stay solo in rural areas if you can't trust anyone. This means having strict entry policies and being willing to turn people away, which most shows portray as villainous, but is actually smart survival. And the final big mistake ties everything together. And this brings us to the ultimate misconception that ties everything together and reveals why most survival plans are doomed from the start: combat focus. Zombie media is packed with fight scenes. Resident Evil features non-stop action. Left 4 Dead is pure combat, and The Walking Dead survivors fight through walker hordes constantly. But fighting should be your absolute last resort. Every engagement risks injury, infection, and attracting more threats through noise. Escape and evasion are way smarter than standing your ground. The Walking Dead characters who survive longest, like Daryl, Pick their battles carefully. World War Z's initial chaos shows how fighting crowds gets you killed. 28 days later, survivors run and hide more than they fight because they're not action heroes. Stealth tactics like moving at night, using distractions, and avoiding populated areas keep you alive longer than any weapon. Fortification beats confrontation every time, letting threats pass by instead of engaging them directly. Train to avoid zombies, not kill them, because the best fight is the one you never have. This mindset shift turns you from a warrior into a survivor who actually sees long-term success. If you enjoyed this video and want to see everything people get wrong about zombie apocalypse survival, click the video on the screen.